Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers tried one time to sit Anthony Davis on the second end of a back-to-back and got away with it. Not so lucky in Houston. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube. That's where you go to find the show. You can see it, you can watch it, and more importantly, you can communicate, participate, interact with a community of Lakers fans and NBA fans and show fans that is over 13,000 strong. We're actually closer to 14 now than 13. So again, everybody who is supporting that channel, we appreciate it and we thank you. And we will read some of your angry comments that will be undoubtedly left on the site today for Friday's show. I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Basketball GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your own basketball franchise? This game is definitely for you then. So download the game. You do that, just visit ultimatebasketballgm.com or look it up on the App Store. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On. All caps, Locked On, in the game. A lot to unpack, Andy, from Wednesday's 114 to 110 loss to the Houston Rockets, a costly one for a Lakers team that had been making up ground for the last few weeks. A lot of games going on. You lose to a team that now only has 17 wins. This hurts.
Oh, yeah. This one's bad. I mean, the Lakers have gotten lucky in the sense that there have been teams tonight, in their general chase that have been cooperating with
Minnesota
them.
lost, for example.
Yeah, Minnesota lost, for example. But this is going to be one of those games where, obviously, if the Lakers miss the play-in altogether, that people are going to look back on and say, this was a big shot in the foot for them. But even if they end up in the lower half of the play-in and have to win twice in order to get themselves into the playoffs, if they're one game short of just being a 7 or an 8, this is a game where you will look back on it and say, yeah, I get it. There was no LeBron, no AD. Yeah, I get it. Second end of a back-to-back. Yeah, I get it. Houston was coming off a big win over the Celtics, but you know what? The Celtics, that win, just their 16th of the season until, Brian, their 17th this
right.
one.
Red hot Houston Rockets. Find me a team that's been better over their last two games than the Houston Rockets. I mean, and there will be a lot of ways that people look at this game in terms of who to blame. And we're going to get into a lot of that. We have a long list. But like to your point, Andy, about where you place this contextually, depending on where the Lakers finish up, like this is not the most offensive loss the Lakers have had this year. There was that stretch, when they, I can't, there were so many games, like Indiana, like a bunch of other ones, the Philly game that they could have won and did. There was a stretch of, 3 or 4 weeks when they almost refused to close out games, refused to accept potential gifts from opponents, and all that. So in some ways, like I can say, like, okay, was this in a vacuum the grossest loss of the year? You want to argue that it isn't? Fine. You want to argue that there are circumstances, Andy, like say AD and LeBron, not there. Fine.
I mean, I'm not making these arguments, but go
I'm
ahead.
just there. But in terms of just raw costliness in the context of where you are in a season, and it is in fact different to lose a game to a team like Houston in what are we in? What month are we in? March? In March than it is to lose to a bad team in February or to lose to them in January. Like the circumstances have changed. And we both thought the Lakers should win this game. Not that they necessarily would, but they absolutely should have won this game when we were talking about not playing AD. Now, I don't think this changes the calculus on whether or not they should have played Davis. I don't. I can see why people would. I'm sure a lot of people will be saying that, but it doesn't matter. Like, they needed to win the game. Guys needed to step up and perform and beat a team that had 16 flipping wins coming into it. Like, they had to win the game and they didn't.
This is why I would say that this loss is worse than a lot of the other ones that you maybe not specifically referenced, but broadly referenced.
Right. I couldn't remember. I'm missing a lot of games. I'm getting the detail, but people know what I'm talking about when I mention these games that they've given away.
It's been a long year. It's been a long season, but the difference to me between tonight and some of these other ones that you're talking about is their inability to close often came against legit competition and teams that at least are capable enough that you can understand why closing against them would be difficult, even if you still think Lakers should have closed those games, had enough opportunities to do it. It's their own fault that they didn't make it happen. The Houston Rockets are not a team that should have required closing in the first place. Like, flipping that sign from open to closed with this team should not require, at the risk of overlooking them. And, we pointed out actually that Anthony Davis, in saying that he wasn't going to be playing and saying that the team shouldn't take it lightly, pointed out that the Rockets had just beaten the Celtics. And for what it's worth, Wenyen Gabriel said after the game that he didn't think the team took Houston lightly, entered with that mindset. If nothing else, I can believe Wenyen didn't, because he just doesn't do that sort of stuff. I don't think he can take his NBA
I'm not sure
career
what
lightly.
Wenyen not playing hard even looks like. Like, what is that? I don't know what that looks like.
Him showing up to the wrong arena, not being there. I mean, but this is a game that should not have required complications in closing in the first place. Frankly, it is just as inconvenient for the Rockets that the Lakers lost as it is for the Lakers.
Yeah, it is. Look, it was a night. You had nice things to say about the Lakers supporting cast, particularly the bench. And for Wednesday's show.
Then.
I'd like to re-record that program. And look,
my general comment that they've been stepping up for the most part is accurate.
Right. And I think if you look at the bench, Schroeder was not efficient, 3 of 10 from the floor, but he did have, he got the line 12 times.
Yeah.
He ends up with 16 points on 10 shots. Is the distribution there? No, it's not great. But Reeves was the best player on the floor for the Lakers, I thought. He had 24 points, finished with 13 trips to the line, 2 of those in the most unnecessary technical free throws ever assessed in the history of basketball. But you start looking around the rest of the lineup, and this was a night where, D'Angelo Russell, they needed more than 5 of 17. Malik Beasley fell back into the slump that he had been in until Tuesday's game. He was 4 of 12 from 3-point range, but the last one was a meaningless shot. At least I think it was pretty late. But 4 of 12 from 3 isn't getting it done. 6 of 17 overall, 17 shots to get 16 points. Rui Hachimura, who started this game, that is a point we're going to get into in the next segment, was bad. Offered very little. So, it was a night where the supporting cast needed to elevate a little bit. Not necessarily a ton, but it was disappointing that they couldn't figure out a way to get it done. I actually thought when they got to that within 5 after the technical foul where Jayshawn Tate accidentally hit Reeves in the throat, which is very on brand for Austin Reeves to be elbowed in the throat like it's professional wrestling.
His throat decided to give his face the night off.
Exactly. I actually thought at that point, I think they're going to win this game. Houston comes back, hits 3 straight 3-pointers. To that point, I think they only had 4 3-pointers in the entire game. And that was pretty much it. Like, the Lakers never really, truly threatened after that. Again, much to unpack
The Lakers, by the way, just really quick, because I know
Sure.
we're going to focus on some stuff that may not be specifically this. I recognize how difficult it is to run your offense without your two best offensive players in LeBron and AD, and without your best offensive quarterback in LeBron. Their offense tonight, they were basically running a shrug emoji.
It was bad and
discombobulated mush.
But it happened. Darvin Ham actually had a really good explanation for why it happened that way. And that will allow us then to question things that Darvin did, which might have impacted why the offense ran that way. So let's get into that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM, and we are excited by our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming a basketball GM, an NBA GM, and managing your own franchise? Well, that dream can come true with Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Manage every strategic aspect of your season. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and assistants, trading and training players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the drafts and all the ups and downs of a season. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free. It's playable offline. You can play it on the go as you want, whenever you want to. I have created a new GM for my team, the Los Angeles Knights. His name is Chaz Bartender. Locked On Lakers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. Make sure to check it out. Make sure that Locked On is in all caps. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com. Scan the code, look it up in the app stores. That is probasketballgm.com. That promo code Locked On in all caps. Start your dynasty today.
So a significant reason the Lakers lost this game is because, particularly early in the game, the Houston Rockets had a pathway to the rim laid out for them that was just as clear as could be. The lack of rim protection, the lack of point of attack defense that allowed Houston to get into the paint to be able to score. Houston dominated, particularly in the first half, in terms of paint points. And it wasn't just like Alpi Şengün going off. I mean, Şengün only had 13 points in this. This was like Kevin Porter Jr., waltzing to the rim, offensive rebounds that they were giving up, all of this kind of stuff, 16 on the night. To say the least, the lack of size for the Lakers was noticeable. The lack of rim protection was noticeable. And Darvin correctly pointed out that the fact that the Lakers were constantly taking the ball out of the basket put them in half-court offenses, didn't make it so they had to could put pressure on Houston defensively in transition. The Rockets are awful, in any kind of situation like that. They made it as easy for Houston as they possibly could by not playing any defense of their own. He's not wrong, but Andy, there are a few reasons why the Lakers had that open parade to the rim, starting with the starting lineup.
Yeah, in what was shocking. I mean, I don't know any other way to put how out of left field this felt. Like, even Stu Lance commented during the game that he was surprised. I think everybody assumed, you and me included, that he would naturally start Wenyen Gabriel at center because he's the only guy currently healthy on this roster that regularly plays center. Darvin opted instead to go with a smaller lineup with Rui Hachimura entering the starting five. And Vanderbilt, I guess, is your sort of de facto center in that lineup, but he's played small ball center. But like that is, it's Hachimura, Vanderbilt, Brown, Russell, Beasley. That it's a pretty small. They've both done it a little bit. Neither one of them though does it often. And in the meantime, cannot stress this enough, Wenyen Gabriel plays center, and he plays center for the Los Angeles Lakers. So it felt like he was, he'd be the obvious choice, particularly since he is, while imperfect, by far the best defensive big on this team, the best shot blocker on this team, the best lane deterrent on this team, the best defensive rebounder on this team, other than
that was
maybe Jared Vanderbilt.
Because he's not
I
don't think the lane deterrence thing really matters, because he's not a rim protector and he's not a lane deterrent necessarily.
He did in this game.
Compared to Rui Hachimura, he is.
No, but period. Actually, he did a decent job as a lane deterrent in this game. He was often active in this game. I mean, again, just beyond compared to Rui, he actually had several
either way
plays where he did that.
I broadly speaking, it's not his strength, but yes, relative. Certainly, I would agree with you. Certainly, at least the very least, relative to what they had available, all of those things. But from a rebounding standpoint, that is, there's no question he is a better and more consistent rebounder than Hachimura, who finished tonight's game with 0 rebounds in 17 minutes compared to Wenyen with 14, including 7 on the offensive end. I was thinking about this because I was running around. I caught up to the game a little bit late and kind of going through and all this. And so I saw that he was in the starting lineup, but didn't really see what it was until I got home. Why do you think? Because Darvin was asked about replacing Hachimura with Wenyen for the start of the third quarter, but wasn't asked, at least after the game, why he chose to start Rui in the first place. Why do you think he chose to start Rui in the first place? I have one idea, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, before I even get to that, I just wanted to read Darvin's quote when he was asked by somebody about what Wenyen brought to the table once he entered the starting lineup to begin the second half. And he said, quote, Wenyen did a fantastic job rebounding, his activity, his length, changing up shots. Again, his defensive activity in the paint, his ability to secure defensive rebounds. We wanted to go with that. That honestly felt like him explaining why he would have just started
Rui in the first place. Right.
The two things I could think of as devil's advocate arguments, neither one of them I think are particularly good, and neither one was executed well regardless. One would be that he was worried Wenyen would get into foul trouble if he started, which to me is just too passive a way to begin this game when you're talking about your only actual center. Like
that occurred to me. I don't think that was it. But
if that is, that's just a
terrible
bad
reason.
That's a bad reason. The other thing I could think of was they decided that the coaching staff or Darvin that they wanted to, rather than try to offset AD's absence defensively with Wenyen, they wanted to offset AD's absence offensively with Rui. And, Rui, you could argue, is the best pure scorer off the bench. You could at least argue that. Certainly, and he's bigger, among the taller people. If you're going to do that, though, if that is your rationale for putting out somebody that you know is going to provide problems defensively, like you just know this because you're asking Rui or Vanderbilt or both to do what they're really not supposed to be doing, you need to be like running sets for Rui. Like you need to be letting him cook. The guy took 5 shots. He took 5. Like they didn't involve him offensively. Like if you're going to be doing it for that reason, Rui needs to be like optimized and featured and like make it very clear we are looking to utilize this guy as a scorer. Because if you're not doing that, then frankly, I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, my thought of why you go with that lineup was it's sort of a corollary to kind of, I think maybe sort of what you're implying a little bit. I think they were just concerned about the spacing issues that come with Vanderbilt and Wenyen in the same front court, because neither one of those guys are really capable of spacing a floor in any kind of reliable way. So I think that was, if I had to guess, that would be it, that you're looking at the sort of offensive balance or whatever it might be. But like, I mean, you got to be at least be aware of what you're giving up. And this is one of those games where, Houston came out, very hot, but also it wasn't like the Portland game, the one a couple weeks ago where Portland was burying 3 after 3 after 3 in ways where you just go like, okay, I mean, Damian Lillard's like halfway to his own locker room and he's hitting threes. Part of the reason the Rockets were shooting 80% halfway through the first quarter is they were mostly taking layups. And so if you're running a layup line, and the Lakers, whether it's because Houston regressed a little bit, because the Lakers picked it up a little bit or whatever, they did have their best quarter in the third when they made that switch. They weren't exactly dominant, but one thing, you know what Houston did in the third quarter? They scored 21 points. So maybe if you come out that way early, the offense doesn't look very good either, but Houston doesn't shoot 80% to start the game.
48 of the 78 points that Houston had in the paint, which 78 is just staggering for those who don't keep track of these sort of stats. That is a lot.
It's a lot.
48 were in the first half, and 22 were in the first quarter. Like this, it would be overstating it to say that this decision cost the Lakers the game because too much happened. But this decision, make no mistake about it, put the Lakers behind the 8 ball. This was a decision that put the Lakers on their heels. And I will say this, for Darvin to make this type of decision that just was very outside the box, very unexpected, I'm not going to say you have to win the game because that's too much to put on Darvin, but the logic has to justify itself. This was a very inconvenient night for Darvin that Wenyen badly outplayed Rui.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, really.
Yeah.
Wenyen
I mean, look, again,
Wenyen was one of the best players
on
the floor tonight.
I get the, like I said, I get, like, my idea was spacing. I think that's what they were concerned about. If I had to guess, and I do because I'm not in Houston and nobody asked. And so that is my guess. And, you know, could it have gone worse with Wenyen in the lineup? Sure. Like, you know, I don't know.
But at least you're doing the normal thing and it went worse.
You know, to the extent that, you know, you're looking at this and you say, you know, the Lakers on a night without Anthony Davis and a night without, you know, LeBron and you don't have any bigs really other than Wenyen. It seems to me that it might be the night to just kind of do the thing that seems like the most straightforward thing.
Yes.
Again, you know, I guess, you know, you look at Houston as a, you know, not a perimeter oriented team. They're a bad 3-point shooting team. Maybe you feel like Hachimura is a better, you know, defender out in space on the perimeter. I don't know exactly what.
He's not better than Wenyen. I mean, he just isn't.
At much anything defensively. I agree with you. I don't get it.
I mean, Rui has been better than I thought he would be defensively, or better than his reputation, but he's not better defensively than Wenyen.
You don't set him up on at the point of attack on the perimeter and just let him go. The other thing that happened here that I guess is at least somewhat related to this conversation we're having about who should have been starting is why the Lakers, if they knew Anthony Davis was not going to play. By the way, there's one more of these games left on the schedule. Why was Wenyen Gabriel the only big on the roster? We'll talk about that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Built Bar. If you want a great tasting treat, but you don't want the fat and the calories, you got to try yourself a Built Bar. Just eating is a 24/7 lifestyle in our world. We are a foodie culture. There's food shows everywhere, and you don't want to be doing damage to yourself. But at the same time, it's like you want your eating to taste good because it's the whole reason you do it in the first place. So that's why you got to have yourself a Built Bar. With Built Bars, healthy actually tastes great, and it is perfect for offsetting the festive eating that you do. And they're always covered in 100% real chocolate, great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. They taste like candy bars deceptively because they only have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. That's the good stuff. And you don't even have to wait around for a box. Like we've talked for years about how you can order them from built.com. Still a good option, but if you want to get them quicker, just go to your local Walmart. They're in the pharmacy section, or go to a Sam's Club. However you get your Built Bars, pick up a box of assorted flavors and enjoy.
All right, and Locked on Lakers also brought to you by FanDuel. Andy, the stretch run of the NBA season is here. We are in the midst of it, and the Lakers are doing some interesting stuff in it. It is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 American dollars. That is bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. And And FanDuel even lets you, Andy, combine your bets for a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. I'm going to stipulate the following with the following. I 100% believe that, like you and I said, like, do you have to have a backup center when Bamba goes down? Are you likely to find somebody off the streets who's going to come in and make a really big impact and play big minutes and all that? Probably not. But if you know you're going to have at least one game where Anthony Davis is not going to be allowed to play because that is your medical protocol that you should follow. 100% agree. Anthony Davis, the doctors say, needs a game off in between because it's an active injury and it's got to okay. Sucks, but okay. You know Mo Bamba is hurt. You know you don't have anyone bigger than Wenyen Gabriel available to you. It's malpractice not to have somebody on the bench for a 10-day contract because any large human being might have come in handy in this game to stand in front of the rim like this and at least try to make life harder. Find the best rim protector in the G League and sign him for 10 days. I do not for the life of me understand why this player wasn't available. Might not have made a difference, but why wasn't he there?
Well, this gets back to the whole thing about, the communication about AD not being available for both ends of a back-to-back, which, began with Darvin Ham perhaps misstating, perhaps saying more than he should have, whatever, but saying that, for the final 23 games of the, post All-Star break section of this season, we're going full steam ahead. Everybody is going to be available. We're not going to be having any type of restrictions.
For the record, I think he misspoke, but he just kind of got ahead of himself and getting all rah-rah and,
whatever. I mean, part of your job is to communicate this. But anyway, that starts out the confusion. But then we end up seeing Anthony Davis not playing the second end of the previous back-to-back, create some panic. There's more that we learn. But the fact that they didn't bring in anybody after Bamba got hurt leads to the natural assumption that, of course, AD is going to be available for back-to-backs because otherwise you got to sign somebody big. You know what I mean? There's all these different things that are natural assumptions, and yet the natural conclusions aren't playing themselves out. It's frustrating, in a night where you feel like, if nothing else, maybe it could have helped. But it's also just frustrating because you're like, what's going on with just the overall planning with this? What's happening? One of these,
and I don't think there's nobody out. I've seen Dwight Howard is not a playable NBA player. No. Boogie Cousins is not playable. And by the way, Boogie's not going to solve what you need him for anyway. If you're going to sign you're going to sign a center, you need to sign somebody who looks as much like Mo Bamba as you can. A rim protecting tall person is what you need. Ideally, find the biggest dude you can, who's a little more stout inside even than Mo. Whatever. I suspect they look at it the same way we did, where you say, he's not going to play. Do we need to really, why are we adding someone to the roster who's not going to be? Because you might need him, and you're the Los Angeles frickin' Lakers. Sign a human to a 10-day contract. But if Andy, they knew Anthony Davis wasn't going to play. What happened if Wenyen Gabriel turns his ankle in warmups? He steps on a slippery spot, like that kid who couldn't mop in Phoenix, ruined their season.
Right. With Kevin Durant. This just happened. I mean, let me put it in more simple terms. Is this team given everything that's happened the last few years, really the one that's going to say, yeah, you know what, injury bug.
What could have? What bad could have happened to us?
I mean, how often do injuries really happen? Like, this is the team that's
We're the luckiest gang in the NBA.
Like, it would be one thing if Davis was going to be available. Like, I could understand it then. If you were counting on AD to be playing in all of these games, unless he legitimately re-injured himself, okay, then yeah, I get not bringing somebody in if you really think, like, seriously, we don't even really need him. But at this point, you actually need the guy. Like,
when my
guys for
kids
10-day contracts just for the period of the back-to-backs.
Yes. When my children go to school and the school knows the teacher's not going to be there that day, they get a substitute teacher. Like, somebody is in the classroom.
Yeah.
It's not, again, it's not even so much that I'm like convinced that this hypothetical street free agent would have made a big difference. It's the principle of it.
Yes.
It's the planning of it. It reminds me of the time that you and me, you were in high school and driving, we went to McDonald's and you got into a car accident, and like, our dad was like really cool about, like, everybody's okay, this and that, and he was totally fine, wasn't angry about anything at all until he found out which McDonald's we went to. And then he got really mad because we went to one like 4 McDonald's further away than where we needed to go, because that one had the best French fries. Now, I maintain that was a perfectly reasonable reason, that was totally justifiable why you would go to the other McDonald's. He didn't see it that way. He was upset on the principle of, why are you morons driving further? That is a dumb way to do it. This is like that. It is a dumb way to go into this game knowing you're going to need a human being and just being like, we'll only need him for a day. It bothers me more than it should, but it bothers me.
No, I mean, I'll tell you this. It bothers me a hell of a lot more than a lot of the Twitter chatter that I've seen during this game at Cam Brothers, or that I'm sure we're going to see in the comments section, when people are saying AD should just overrule the medical staff and say, F all y'all, I'm playing. Like, that's not how the NBA works anymore. And I think in some ways it's been mythologized that it worked that way more than it ever actually really did. And in certain respects, that's really more of just a Kobe thing. But AD has said specifically what he's been told is that this injury, because it is an active injury, requires a day in between games in order to not exacerbate it further. And this is, by the way,
the risk. Yes.
Right. And this, by the way, also is where the communication with the whole AD availability thing has been botched, when they've said that it's pain-free, which happy to hear, but he's not playing in these like, they would have been better off just lying, honestly, and just said, like, look, we're treating this really carefully. He's playing through some pain. AD, say you're playing through pain. Like, they'd have been better off making it sound worse than it is to justify all the stuff that's happened afterwards than where we are now. But anyway, I will never question when a player isn't out on the floor or question an injury. I think people familiar with this podcast know I speak my mind pretty freely. Brian, I think you're the same. I'll go just about anywhere, and I don't particularly care if people agree with me or not. I will not question players' bodies, players' injuries. That's basically
particularly when they're told by doctors, right. Like, if AD had, like, you don't overrule your oncologist. Like, if you're getting treatments for serious disease or anything like that, this is what the doctors are for.
Right.
And you assuming you trust them, I think he does, because they, in theory, are the people who know and are watching for your career in a holistic way. And also the rest of the season, if the risk goes up that, when he plays these back-to-backs, you're putting at the rest, the remaining 11 games. But Andy,
And by the way, it's not even like a pain tolerance thing. AD says it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. That's fine. But the injuries, I believe them. I'm not a doctor. But
I know, but I'm saying even if you don't believe him, he says it doesn't hurt. If he wanted to milk this, he would say it hurts like hell.
Right. They have one more of these games. They got the April 5th game against the Clippers, which, by the way, could turn out to be really, I mean, even by these standards, could be elevated to the degree. Mo Bamba's probably not going to be available for that game. Hopefully LeBron is there. I don't know if Anthony Davis is, I don't know what the schedule looks like. Is he going to be allowed to play back-to-backs by then? But like, are you going to go to another game with the Clippers where like LeBron is essentially your center against Zubats and Plumlee? Like, are we doing this again on April 5th? That is my question. I'm like really waiting with bated breath to find out if they sign a guy to a 10-day before April 5th. Like, that's how upset I am by this. Anyway, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show and see my face be looking like this because they didn't sign a 10-day guy. So Dallas now on Friday. Do you know if they said Luka and Kyrie both did not play on Wednesday? They still managed to beat the Spurs. So we'll see who's available for the Mavericks on Friday. And we will likely be back after that one to break it all down. We'll see everybody tomorrow.